Can you hear me? Oh, good. The last time I was here was in October, listening to Jen Williams, who is my daughter. And so I know a lot about Wildrooms Farm and seeds, and I know that she spoke with Trudy and wants to give y'all a discount for starting seeds for the Garden Club sale. So please be sure and take advantage of that, because I know she really wants to. As Kari said, I'm Marilee Runyon, and I thank you for inviting me to talk to you about gardening for the climate, or maybe how we can address the climate crisis in our gardens. You might wonder how I came to this particular role. In fact, I think somebody asked me here, and they were like, how are you talking about this? I'm not an expert on climate science, political action, or even gardening. What I am is a mother, a grandmother, a former teacher, a former lavender farmer, a community volunteer, and a gardener. A gardener that's in love with the earth. I think what brought me here to you today is an effort called the Soil Ambassadors. In 2020, I and a group of friends started the Soil Ambassadors to offer the community ideas about the soil care practices that are powerful ways to mitigate the climate crisis, even at the home garden level. Then came COVID, and even though we had fabulous plans to do community education, we all stayed home instead. In the intervening years, we've lost one of our members, Lotus, and the news about the climate has gotten worse. But I think it's time to start again, and I'm really glad to be here. We all know how terrible the predictions of the impact of climate change are. You'll be glad to know I'm not going to list them all for you today. I learned years ago that you can't really scare people into action, or at least not all people. I learned this in the mid-'80s while working in an organization called Beyond War. Our goal was simply to eliminate the threat of nuclear war by eliminating nuclear weapons. We were a volunteer educational effort. I spoke to church groups, parent groups, high school students, Rotary clubs, Kiwanis clubs. Remember when they had Kiwanis clubs? All kinds of groups. And the way we would introduce the vast number of nuclear weapons that existed in the world was to pour hundreds of metal BBs into a metal pail very slowly. We thought that the intensity, each BB represented one nuclear weapon that existed in the world, so there were a lot. We thought that the intensity of the sound of those hundreds of BBs would get people to understand the threat and move to action. In fact, it usually paralyzed them. It was so frightening that hardly anybody wanted to get involved. They just wanted to go home. I think the same thing happens when we bring up the climate. The news is so awful and overwhelming that I often feel hopeless, and I don't think I'm the only one. I care about it. I care about the future of the earth, my grandkids' future, all of our grandchildren, all of the children in the world. We're not lazy or bad or disinterested people, but where do we start? Today, I want to offer 3 ideas about the climate, or addressing the climate, that are sparked by optimism and joy, and a way to engage in action that is hopeful. I believe that making our gardens better and showing others what we are doing can be an effective way to inspire more conversation and action. And, I got to start by listening to Julia talk about all of the work on pollinator gardens, which is a really big part of this. So you're already like zooming along. But what I've been learning about and been really excited about is research about soil. New scientific research corroborates what ancient indigenous people have always known about how to care for the earth, and suggests that caring for soil is one of the most powerful ways to mitigate some of the worst effects of climate crisis. By learning from the natural world and nurturing its processes, as we garden, we can restore soil that has become degraded and lost its vitality. Scientific research into soil is actually pretty new. The last, I think, 10, 15 years has been sort of an explosion of understanding what's really going on below the surface. Before that, people just kind of didn't get it. And I don't know if any of you read some of the books, but one of my favorites is called Finding the Mother Tree, which is written by a woman, Suzanne Simard, and opened up for me the whole world of all of the microbiological life that exists under the ground that I can't see, and the impact of that on our forests. While many indigenous cultures have long understood that soil is alive and have developed practices that nurture that life, our scientific community is catching up. It's exciting and it's hopeful. And we, gardeners, are an important part of creating healthy, biologically active soils and gardens that nurture biodiversity. I know that you are all gardeners and know a lot about how to grow food and ornamentals and natives and how to care for your soil. I know I'm not speaking to beginners, but to knowledgeable, deeply committed gardeners. I'm one of you, but I found some resources that have helped me become more intentional and planful as I think about and work in my garden, and that's what I'd like to share. I have 3 ideas that I found helpful and encouraging. I'm going to step over to my flip chart and show you. My husband said to do it this way because if you saw the whole thing, it would be distracting. So. He's my coach. The first one from Green America, a national movement called Climate Victory Gardens. If you don't know Green America, it's a nonprofit organization that harnesses economic power, the strength of consumers, investors, businesses, and the marketplace to create a socially just and environmentally sustainable society. Several years ago, they initiated Climate Victory Gardens, a national effort based on the victory garden movement of World Wars I and II, when Americans planted gardens to feed and support their local communities and even the troops overseas. They were wildly successful. By 1944, nearly 20 million victory gardens in the United States produced 8 million tons of food. This incredible grassroots organizing and community effort is the inspiration for Climate Victory Gardens. They bring the practices of regenerative agriculture to the home garden level. This is a way of organic farming that focuses on creating and maintaining healthy soil. You know that plants pull carbon out of the air and turn it into the sugars they need to grow and release oxygen. Some of that carbon is released underground through roots to feed the soil community, the earthworms, the bacteria, the fungi, and millions of other species, some we don't even know about yet. In turn, these organisms build healthy soil and provide nutrients for crops. What's important is for carbon to stay underground, where it contributes to soil health, rather than re-entering the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas, which it does when we regularly disturb soil by tilling, by all the mechanical things we do to turn over the soil. And I don't know if any of you remember, but when I first started gardening, sort of the apex of great gardening was double digging. Remember? It was just agonizing, but I was determined to do it. And I've been so relieved to know that actually we don't want to do that. We don't want to disturb the soil in that way by turning it over and over. So it's a relief to me because I'm not into double digging anymore. Regenerative agriculture practices minimize soil disturbance and improve the soil's ability to store carbon. The healthier the soil is, the better it is at holding carbon. In fact, research from the Rodale Institute, which is in Pennsylvania, shows that regenerative methods, if widely adopted, could sequester more than 100% of the carbon dioxide that's emitted in the world. I mean, that's incredible when you think about it. It would also require a major revolution in the way we farm. But we can apply these same practices in our home gardens. And I'm going to show you what Climate Victory Gardens suggest. So they suggest 10 things that you can do in your gardens that can sequester carbon, that can build healthy soil, that can provide habitat for pollinators, and grow some food. Turn it a little bit? Okay. A little bit more. A little bit more. Okay. Still. Oh, thanks. I'm going to shout and stand by it because I can't do the mic and do this. Oh, I can shout. Can you hear me? I'm a teacher, so I can have a big voice. We can all grow some food.
Yeah.
Oh, you can do that?
We can also loosen it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I see. Thank you.
There we go. Now we can hear and see. Perfect.
Okay. You know, I think I can do it like this. Maybe. Oh, right. That's not helpful. Okay.
There you go.
So these are the 10 practices, or 9 practices recommended for a climate victory garden. Grow some food. If we all grow some food, we reduce the mileage that it takes to get food to us. And the thing I think about is that I've learned to grow a little food is it makes me unbelievably appreciative of farmers, because growing good food is not that easy, at least for me. I've had more failures than successes. Keep soils covered all the time with mulch, with compost, so that no bare soil. Now I heard Julia talk about leaving a little soil bare, a little bit for bees, and that makes sense. But in general, keeping the soil covered, it does a lot of things. It keeps moisture in the soil, and all of that eventually gets worked into the soil and builds its growing capacity. Encourage biodiversity. And this is the thing I'm working on this year, working on growing what are called polycrop. Instead of having a whole garden bed of cucumbers, I'm growing cucumbers and some pollinator plants and a little calendula and some lettuce, because if you, at least what I understand is if you grow that way, you have less pest pressure because you just haven't created a buffet for all of these creatures. Compost. Plant perennials. Again, if we plant perennials, we disturb the soil less because they stay there. We don't dig them up, throw them out every year. Of course, ditch the chemicals. I've been an organic gardener forever, and I'm looking at Diane and thinking of all the work she and Michael have done to help us understand good gardening practices. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here. Consider adding animals. I live in Burton on a little lot, and I'm not going to be having any goats or sheep. And I'd love to have chickens. I had chickens always until we moved to this small area, but it just doesn't work for us right now. But adding animals is another source of eating some of the pests in your garden. They provide manure that you can add to your compost. And I don't know if you've ever gardened with chickens around, but they're really good company. The little noises they make as you're out there. Reduce mechanization. Again, in the home garden, probably hardly any of us use tillers. We just use ourselves. I bought a Broadfork from Bob Powell years ago, and it's my best aerobic exercise to just put my foot on it, rock it back, open up a little air in the soil without turning it over. And lastly, for annuals, rotate them. Rotate annuals in plants so you don't do the same thing in the same bed over and over again. I bet all of you do this in your gardens. None of this is like new or difficult. But all of these things make soil healthier. And that's what we really want. I'm going to walk around here, go back to my notes. We can apply these practices, and almost everyone can grow some food, provide some pollinator habitat and healthy soil, whether you have a huge plot of land or even a balcony. You can grow pollinator plants on a deck. I've done it, I bet many of you have. To date, there are more than 26,000 climate victory gardens across the United States. And all it takes is to write to Green America and register your garden. And I just wonder, I think about Julia's work with native habitat gardens. How many more climate victory gardens could we get from Vashon? That'd be kind of exciting. The second idea I want to share with you, though, is something called an ARC, an act of restorative kindness to the earth. This out of the way move this. Have any of you heard of a garden designer named Mary Reynolds?
What?
Good, I get to tell you about her. She is what she calls herself a reformed garden designer. She is the youngest woman to have ever won the gold medal at the Chelsea Flower Show, which she did in 2002 for a garden that she designed. After that experience and learning more about the state of the earth and what incredibly beautiful but intricately designed gardens were contributing or not contributing, she created this movement called the Ark. And she is an international figure. She now believes that gardens that are purely artistic endeavors or feats for just the human senses are outmoded. She proposes that gardens must be less about human aesthetics and more about restoring native ecosystems to provide space and sanctuary for all of the creatures with whom we share the earth, rooted and unrooted. An ark is simply a restored native ecosystem. It can be small, just a little tiny spot in your garden, or medium, or large. There are some large projects that are called rewilding, you may have heard, in England and Ireland, and I hope we begin to see some here, where people are taking their huge manicured estates and turning them into ecological, valid, healthy landscapes by letting the native plants come back and reducing the amount of time spent on manicuring lawns. A thriving patch of native plants and creatures that have been supported by their gardener to reestablish in the earth's own intelligent process of natural restoration. What people find is once you begin this, the earth begins to take over and comes back, and the plants that live there come back, and the creatures dependent on those plants come back. How do we create arks? By letting parts of our gardens go wild with native plants, piles of stone, wood, bug hotels, so that our gardens can become nurseries for pollinators. And again, I know that you know this because Julia's been doing all this great work. We let, in an ark, in an act of restorative kindness, we let the earth breathe as much as possible and create the maximum amount of space for life to be supported. In her book, which I brought, it's at the end of the table, and I'd be more than happy to share it. It has my name in it. You can take it and give it back to me when you're done. She has tons of ideas from the smallest plot to the largest, and step-by-step directions, if you want to see them, in her book called We Are the Ark. You'll notice that many of her suggestions are similar to those identified in Climate Victory Gardens. There's just a lot of crossover here as we think about making our gardens more ecologically healthy. The third and last idea I want to share with you is the fact that the United Nations has created World Soil Day. It's every December 5th, so we missed it this year. On this day, people around the world with support of the United Nations are encouraged to celebrate soil, educate through demonstration, collaborate and engage in action that supports healthy soil. It seems to me that this is a great opportunity to bring the subject of creating and maintaining healthy soils to the attention of our community in creative and hopeful ways. I propose that we gardeners think about how to bring World Soil Day to Vashon in 2025. Oh, there you go, and there's the website.
Mm-hmm.
These are all small, but I think mighty actions. Climate Victory Gardens, ARCs, celebrating World Soil Day can help us share the good news that there are steps we can all take to create healthy soils and healthy ecosystems. And we can all participate in sequestering carbon and reducing the impact of the climate crisis. What I hope is that as we build our gardens, we strengthen our capacity to address the climate crisis and empower and inspire action at the individual, community, and national level. It is the collective action of the many that has the potential to be part of the solution to climate. As Jennifer Jewell, our friend of Cultivating Place, said in a recent podcast I was listening to, gardeners can be the heroes. Let's be them.